All right. So before we move on to the topics for today, Sakari Pausa, am I pronouncing it correctly? But I think it's your first time on this call. Would you like to introduce yourself?
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All righty. Good. Yes. Hello, everybody. So yes. Okay. Now what happened? Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Hey. Yes, I'm Sakari from Intel. Yes, it's I think my first call on this forum. I participated the what was the previous forum? The SIG network service mesh, whatever, a couple times, and I work for Intel, and my responsibilities are, enabling Intel features on service mesh, mainly working on the Istio now, and performance is obviously, close to our agenda, and that's I would like to see what's happening in the SMP area, and hopefully we can contribute something to that area moving forward.
Nice.
So, yeah,
Sakari, it's nice to see you again.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good to be back.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't know that even I could articulate there's a lot of, there's about 3 meetings that are really intertwined. And I think the common point for them is probably the CNCF service mesh working group. There's the SIG network, that's kind of been renamed to tag network, tag network. And it focuses on sort of all of the projects in the CNCF that call their home to networking, to like that area. Then there's the working group that's kind of specifically focused on service mesh initiatives. That we had been having the same meeting time between those 2 groups. And we're like, as of now, we're splitting out, and basically the same project meeting for service mesh performance, where those initiatives inside of the service mesh working group, they're so intertwined that basically this is one in the same meeting here, the tag network meeting being separate, but it will still, the things that we do here will still be reported into and sort of exposed there as well. So. Yeah, I don't know that distinction is even important. Anyway, it's good that you're here. There's a number of things for us to go through. So the project's SMP, this is basically its second time meeting post adoption into the CNCF, and so a couple of weeks ago, and today I expect we'll probably have a little bit of a continuation of the conversation from a couple of weeks ago, which was, well, as the project is now in the CNCF, it's a convenient time to, have some discussions around what do we want to get done here? There is an established charter. Maybe that should have some discussions, some brainstorming. There's under that charter for service mesh performance, there's about 4 categories of things that we think we want to accomplish in general. And we were beginning to lay out some specific goals within there. So I think it would, clearly it will benefit all of us to review that some, to brainstorm potentially if things need to be changed. Part of what we accomplish here together is, not part of, but it's highly dependent upon who shows up, or whether it's on the call or not, but just who participates. And so I'm glad that, for my part, I'm glad that you're here, because I hope that you get the sense that you're here to influence what we're doing as well. So your input is quite sought after. Okay. Nice. And Sakari, where you're physically in where? Or what time zone are you in?
I'm in Finland, Europe, Eastern time zone. So
nice. Good. You're about
5 p.m. For me now.
Okay. We're just catching you as you trail off the day.
Yeah, I'm used to this late evening US calls, so that's fine.
Good. Well, okay. So Navenu, I apologize for wrangling the agenda. I do think that it's healthy for us to continue the particular topic I was just mentioning about, what are we doing here? It'll provide a nice backdrop to the rest of our conversation. Let me dive into that for a moment and say, all right, to orient everyone, and some of you are quite well oriented because some of you have some things to show today about advancements that you're making in the project itself. But just because some of this has changed since the project has joined the CNCF. So the project was, in terms of where it lands in GitHub, it was formerly under the layer 5 org in GitHub, but that's been moved out to its own org. Inside of that org, there's one repository, Service Mesh Performance. We've got some stars already, which is good. The initiative has been going on for about a year. So we've had lots of folks come and go. We've had initially a lot of participation from universities, a couple of universities that where we've always, part of the vision for the project has been to do some research, some studies to learn what we can and share with the world what we can about how to run this newfangled infrastructure and run it well. And how do you know if you're running it well, and what should you be measuring? And that's in large part what the spec is about. If you look at the charter and some of the things that we think that we want to accomplish, well, let's capture that this deck right here, this deck is available in GitHub, or I'm sorry, it's linked to from the GitHub README or from the project page. And let's look at that deck, which is, Shayatan, I wonder if you might do us a solid, and it's great that we're providing people the ability to walk through the slides here, which is helpful, but also it's slightly inconvenient not to have a link to open up the deck itself. I wonder if you don't mind, dropping a small caption that has a link to the deck. Because I think if you click here, it won't open up the deck. Good, so we'll go here, kind of like this project overview presentations.
Yeah, Lee, I can drop the link like this. Right?
Oh, thank you, sir. That'd be helpful. Okay, here, so more or less, here's the charter / roadmap, or it's really the roadmap captured into 4 areas. So there's the spec itself. And by the way, Sakari, we're in part, or this, part of what I'm saying is really aimed at you. Like, please feel free to suggest changes or other things. Let's do something together. Please don't let me speak at everyone for the next hour. So there's the spec itself. The spec itself needs refinement. What is the spec? It's a set of protobufs that do their best to capture relevant information about the infrastructure, the service mesh, the application, or the services that are running on the mesh, and to capture that, take a snap, to basically define a standard set of signals that are interesting to be able to, or that are necessary to be able to articulate how well a system is performing, like how well a service mesh deployment is performing. And as that becomes common reference, through that common reference, it becomes, well, we'll see, standard is potentially a big word if you're, depending upon how you mean it, but that a lot of value is derived from the measuring something in the same way or under the same unit of measure. And so the protos are, they're sourced from the Istio, well, it's no longer a working group, but it was the Istio Performance and Scalability Working Group, I think, inside of the Istio project. And so the protos that are there, that used to be just a simple markdown file, we've taken that and refined it into protos. Those protos are now being used inside the tool Meshery, the tool that implements SMP, or the first tool to implement SMP. And so there's ongoing work to be done to review what's being captured. Is it enough? Is it too much? Is it service mesh? Is it specific to Istio? Understanding its genesis. So those are part of the questions, I think, under the spec itself. Things that need to evolve. One of the things that needs to evolve is, well, my goodness, if the spec, and let's go look at it briefly. If the spec is intending to capture, so here's the 3 Protobuf files that are capturing it today. If it's going to capture information about the specific service mesh that's deployed, the configuration of that mesh, your infrastructure, so your Kubernetes clusters, their size, their resources, etc. Like I won't step through all of what it's supposed to get, but it's a lot, and some of that is, well, the application itself. So what type of workload are you running? How busy is it? Its characteristics have an impact. You have a consideration on the overhead of the whole system, the performance of the whole system. So how do you characterize just the application itself? It's like, oh my gosh, each of these areas can be fairly deep. And so a couple of these areas are attempts to define them have been done by other projects. So for example, there's this project Open Application Model, OAM. It helps define, well, apps that you deploy on Kubernetes, or it helps define Kubernetes itself, the configuration of Kubernetes. So anyway, the point here is that as SMP is most closely married with SMI, Service Mesh Interface, and Service Mesh Interface describes features of a given mesh and how you might configure those features. Well, that's relevant to SMP. So there needs to be an interchange. SMP doesn't need to reinvent any of those wheels, but rather reference and use those descriptions. So I think next time when Otto is here, that this is part of what he was going to dig into with us a bit more, was to give some perspectives, some review of those protos, and suggest some changes. So I'll pause there. Feedback on the spec itself. Not necessarily on the particular protos, but I just mean like the goals around that roadmap. Okay, another area is participation from each of the service mesh projects or products. And by this, one of the goals here is, and so by the way, the next few slides begin to break down these areas into more specific objectives. And so this is in part what we want to build out a little bit more and make sure that we just kind of get a machine going, get a cadence going to each of these things. Actually, so under this area of participation, I was saying it's a goal to have each of the service mesh projects participating. One of those objectives is to have each service mesh project self-reporting the performance of that particular version of their service mesh. Because every time that a new version of the service mesh is released, it's possible that they've regressed in performance or that they've improved. Or for certain types of tests that they've improved or regressed. And so To facilitate self-reporting, Rudraksh is going to talk about a little bit later about a GitHub action that's been made that will invoke and run Meshry, which will run a number of performance tests and capture those metrics and publish them. So we'll look at that in just a minute, but that's an example of what is meant by participation. I mean, also participation from folks like Sakari. Publication. So right now, actually, there's IEEE is at there's the magazine they call The Bridge. They're asking for publication of it, just whatever we want to write about, and they're asking for it 2 weeks ago. So there's plenty of opportunity to help educate the world and share the learnings here. So KubeCon is coming up. Projects like SMP will have a seat at the table to have a talk to tell people about what's going on here, what we're doing. A lot of the folks who want to consume value from the project, not participate in the project, but use its, but leverage it. They are most often interested in this. Like, hey, what's the fastest mesh, or under what conditions, or what are considerations I need to know or understand? They're curious about this. We've long held off on publishing benchmarks or defining them and publishing them. And it's time. It's time now. We've got this ecosystem. There's a couple of things that have happened. One, we're standing, the SMP would be able to publish, authoritative insights about the performance of cloud native applications running in context of a service mesh, in part because it's part of the CNCF now. So we'll use that pulpit, if you will, to publish those. We'll be as even-handed as possible. We had held off on publishing in the past because you're likely to piss off. It'd be really hard not to piss off someone as you do that, because it's a sensitive thing to these projects. And that's not the goal. The goal is to help educate and help users not be scared of the hidden cost of a mesh, but to expose that, talk about it, make sure that people understand it and can use service meshes much to their benefit to actually save on cost. So that's a goal. People want to often compare between them in terms of what they want to, which ones to run. But here's an area, Sakari, that I'm going to call you out again on was something that we often get asked is like, hey, what? Okay, let me say it like this. Well, we often get asked what workloads are being tested. What's a valid? Is part of the goal of the project to produce standard benchmarks? Yes, let's do it. Yes, it's helpful, even though for a given user of a mesh, they may be running a workload that's totally unique to their environment, and it has certain characteristics that are unique to what they're doing. But in general, there are a few example services or workloads that are representative of like a category or a class of a particular type. So maybe one that's database intense, or very high volume, small transactions, but part of what we need to do here is take a stand and say, here's an example one, and we've got a number of sample applications to do just that.
Do we have those sample applications or configurations already available, or is this just kind of a forward-looking?
Yeah, there are a few, and I wouldn't, for my part, I would withhold expressing whether or not they're the best examples or they're not good examples. That's what needs to get figured out. But the few that are there, boy, I'm just trying to think of where there's a common list of them. That here, let me share more of the screen. So SMP as a project its genesis has been tethered to Meshry as a project. And so I'm bringing up Meshry because of that, because it'll also answer this question. So one of the goals that, so Meshry has had common goals to help implement part of what SMP is doing. In Meshry, there are a number of sample apps that are packaged as part of Meshry, as part of a release, that people can take and run, and then run performance tests against, in accordance with, in compliance with the spec. So there's these 4, which are not like, which again, I'll withhold, which I guess I would say like, okay, good. Let's evaluate whether or not these are like, how good any of these are, whether or not these. There is one thing to say about these apps. So there's, actually we just saw a difference. So I was looking at applications that you can easily, that Meshry can easily publish onto Istio. These 4, emoji photo, blah, blah, blah. If you go to the open service mesh, I just randomly clicked on it. There's 5. The 5th one here is the bookstore application. It's the open service mesh sample app. This is very similar to the book info application from Istio. It's their sample app. Emoji Voto, that's the sample app from Linkerd. And so something that Meshry has tried to do is help people learn the different meshes and how they behave differently. And so it takes sample apps from each of the service mesh projects and will let you run that mesh's sample app on this mesh over here, or vice versa, so that you can then see a behavioral or a performance difference across those apps.
Okay, good. I think it's a good start.
Yeah, but it's not. But yeah, right. But if you can't tell, but I don't think it's not the end game. There is. So one of the universities that we engaged with early on and haven't had a lot. How do we helped reformat their sample app, or not their sample app, but their workload app, and didn't really and just didn't find this professor Christina Delimitriou to be desirous of collaboration.
Okay.
But we can take these applications here. So there's 3 that this is Cornell University that Christina Delimitriou is part of. She's had some of her students work on, I keep saying the word sample app, but like representative applications of maybe what a social network might look like.
Yeah.
So we'd helped make these Kubernetes compatible some while ago.
Okay, so have you done this one exactly, that putting this that starter bench on top of Kubernetes and included that as a sample app to the Meshry or this SMP? Is that what you've done, or what you're planning of doing?
We did. So back a year ago was about how long ago it was. These 2 were not published. They were talking about trying to get them ready, and only this one was, and it only worked in Docker Swarm at the time.
Yeah,
this might have been like a year and a half ago, actually. But so then we helped them make it Kubernetes compatible, and so I assume that it still is at the time. And so we included it as a choice in Meshry. And
it's there already. I didn't see it.
It was. We had since pulled it out because it wasn't because it didn't always work, or there were too many resources that it would needed to take, and also because they wouldn't accept our PR for that. I don't know. Like I think she was concerned we were trying to steal her thunder or something, and that was anything really far from the truth. It's like we're just trying to. And
yeah, because internally we are doing the same thing at Intel, that we are putting this one on top of the Kubernetes and measuring it, and
yeah, we'd love to. So Meshry itself has gotten a lot. So back when that was going on, it was like, well, we don't want to give Meshry users a bad taste in their mouth, or just like this, hey, this stuff doesn't work. Meshry is advanced much further along. Yes, it's like very much so desirous that, like, one of the things for Meshry is that, well, okay, it has example apps, great, but it's also starting to just let you load up your own apps separately. So if you have a Kubernetes manifest or set of manifests that today you could just go paste in your definitions here and just have it apply them and run them.
Okay.
Tomorrow, or actually it's about to be released in a few weeks, is that you can just upload the definition of your apps and then have them sitting here so that you can then deal with them ongoing. But yeah, so Sakari, that yeah, please express opinion every which way. Of the apps that you guys have, do you think that those might be candidates to like bundle as common reference in here, or to just maybe in documentation point people to the fact that there are such sample apps you might want to use, or maybe they're not open source and maybe it's just, hey, they are good candidates to use as we collectively do research and do a number of performance tests using an app like that and then publish a study based on that?
Sorry, I was away a couple of seconds. Was that a question to me?
Yeah, yeah, a question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what, as I said, what we have been doing well, there might be more, but the two that I'm aware is this Dead Star benchmarking, that one, and then another one is the Google microservices demo, the boutique, and doing the same thing for that. They both have their own set of issues, but I think those are the kind of applications that we have come across. So it would be good to see these included here as well.
Yeah,
and I haven't dived into the spec itself or the measure. But one thing what is very topical for us right now is, for example, the we have kind of enhanced the Istio and the Envoy to accelerate the TLS handshakes, and we want to somehow demonstrate, the capability, the value of this acceleration, so it can accelerate the handshake, to bring down the latency, free up some CPU cycles and all that. So would this SMP be able to tell that type of difference, that you run the two service mesh, two Istios, like the vanilla Istio and then the Intel accelerated Istio, and you will get a number that, okay, the upstream was 5 and Intel is 7. This stuff. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah. I think. Let's see if this answers the question, which is, let's say that you're running. You're running. Yes, Mesh can deploy multiple instances of a given service mesh. It can then help you deploy your sample app. It can then help you run performance tests against those environments, against those services. And then it can also help you, it also facilitate comparison between two different configurations. And so let's say that you've defined a test. In this case, this is you defined a performance test. You run it any number of times, and you change the configuration from one test to the next. So you turn on the highly tuned MTLS handshake. You've one that has the de facto vanilla, and then one that has the tuned configuration that you guys are working through. Mm-hmm. You can, just take a look at the results from one of the tests and see it characterized and look at its latency and throughput. And then run your second test with a different configuration, and in the UI, highlight the two of them, and then compare the differences between the two runs. So I think that's what.
Okay. Yes, exactly. This looks very familiar and very good.
Yeah.
And this you mentioned earlier that the Meshery is implementing the SMP spec, so the spec is supporting all of this. Is that the correct statement?
Yeah, right. Yes, I would invert the direction of that last sentence to say, well, let me show you a visual to say that yes is the answer that Meshery implements SMP. Meshery's concerns and its goals and things that it currently does and things that it aspires to do are, much broader than SMP's current focus around, performance.
Oh.
So, for example, SMP will, you can load up your WebAssembly filters. It will apply them to, you can then apply those to the mesh. Part of that is very relevant to SMP because then, well, maybe you want to be testing different configurations, understanding what the overhead of using WebAssembly filters versus something else is. But so yeah, so Meshery implements SMP, but it does more.
There's more. Okay.
I'll also Meshery's a young, well, it's got a big old vision, and it's about halfway. It's in its V05. It's about halfway to a 1.0. It's the area that it does the best today, or the oldest feature set that it has, is around performance management. As a matter of fact, we were on a call with other folks from Intel. We were on for a couple of hours on Tuesday, walking through a deployment of Meshery.
Do you remember who was that?
Yeah, in this case, it was in coordination with Mritika.
Mritika, yeah, okay.
She wasn't on this particular call. It was, I think someone relatively new at Intel, Robert, whose last name, who lives in Poland and has a long last name.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I know those folks. Yes. Okay, that's good. Good.
You had asked a question in there that, actually, it was just random that I said that maybe, Meshery does provisioning of WebAssembly filters. As it turns out, like, so in coordination with the University of Austin, Texas, which so happens to be where I live, there was a talk given, I don't know, a couple of KubeCons ago that was, doing just that, like using Meshery to analyze the difference between what if you're running something using a WebAssembly filter versus just the native, like a native filter, what tends to be the difference? And what if you were doing path-based routing or round-robin load balancing or context-based route? Like, there's so many variables to consider that. Anyway, it was a start to some of that side. So, good. So Navendu, and one thing we should probably take a note on is, well, it's just that is like how to proceed with some of those sample apps. Sakari, there is the hipster, Google's hipster microservices app. It was previously supported in Meshery. I don't know if this is the same.
It's called Boutique now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So cool. I don't know. There's so much going on. Like, I don't know why we didn't see it just now, but it was supported in the past. It was included. I'm not sure why it's not included.
Okay.
But absolutely, it can be put back in. Like, it's not. And actually, Sakari, if you don't mind, if that's of interest, or if you think it might be of interest, if you would, like, just open a brief issue just to request support for or re-support maybe for that. Like, that shouldn't take the community too long at all.
Okay, yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Good. Okay. So basically, we were just going through saying, great, here's these different areas. We do desire to take some representative workloads, run through. Now that Meshery is much more capable, and it'll help us automate the setup of environments, Kubernetes environments, and the different configurations of service meshes, and a bunch of different service meshes, and the sample, and it'll capture the performance. Now it becomes a lot easier to actually go do those studies and publish some results. So Zachary, actually it's desirable. It would be wonderful to talk about, well, any of the things that we're learning here at the upcoming KubeCon, so in a few months. One of those could be, I mean, if we end up talking more about the work that you all have been doing on eliminating overhead of TLS, the handshaking, if that's something we end up discussing here, like there's a service mesh performance as a project. Part of what it was intending to do is like provide a venue for this info. Like it's a spec project, so it's it's not an implementation itself, and so as such, it intends to provide a forum for discussion and espousing of best practices, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I think we submitted quite a few proposals for the KubeCon about the tunings that we have been doing. I don't know if the results are out already.
Nice. If those get rejected, come see me. Or like we'll have we've got a place to talk about this. So.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Even if they don't get rejected, let's go talk about them. I mean,
yeah.
Okay, good. I've been babbling on. I've been harassing Zachary. I wonder if Rudraksh, if you might want to take us into the next topic here. It's a relatively new capability.
Yep. So I'm going to talk about an action for performing SMP test. I'll quickly put up my screen. So this is the Meshery SMP action. It would be used for performing SMP test in CI/CD pipelines, and you can just use this. Service mesh projects can use this. People who use service meshes can use this, or other vendors can use this to, like one of the use cases that we just heard was for comparing vanilla SQ and the other SQ. You can just put this into your CI and it will get the job done for you of comparing it. Basically, this is some of the configuration that we will need to give this. This is a provider token. In Meshery terms, it is something that we use for authenticating with a cloud provider, which is used for persisting your performance profiles so that you can keep them using them again and again over time. And also compare previous results with new one. This is the platform which you would be using to deploy Meshery on. This is something right now, might not be a possible field later, but let's not talk about this. Now, these are two of the configuration fields which you can use for creating a performance test. One of them works by supplying a performance profile file, like the one which is compliant with SMP Protos. I'll quickly put up a link. So a file similar to this one, you can specify this and use it to perform performance test, or you can create a profile using the Mesri dashboard, and then just specify the name of it to this action in your workflow. And that would create a performance test with the specified service mesh. This is the sample configuration for this. And we are doing all that stuff, deploying Minikube Kubernetes cluster, and then using this action. Pretty concise. Now I'll take you to a demo of this. First, I'll create a performance profile here. I'll call it test Istio. Then I'll supply Istio here, and this, let's keep concurrent request to 1. Let's keep queries per second to 10. Yeah. Sorry, Google. Then we will save this profile. Now, if you see, we have this profile named test Istio saved. This is the profile name. Now, the token that we need, we'll be grabbing it from here. And selecting it. This right now is a short-lived token, but other projects which need a token with longer expiry can be provided one. Now I'll go to settings and update my secret to contain this token. So here we have the provider token saved on it. Now I just need to make this config. As you can see, I have done much of it already. I'm deploying a Kubernetes cluster using Minikube and using this action to create sample config for a performance test. And here I will specify the name of the profile that I just created, that is test Istio. And now you can see here, it's doing all the stuff. And to save time on this call, I have done this already. This is running, like deploying a cluster, and while performing a test, it first fetches your profile. For me, this profile I specified contained an Istio service mesh, so this action very smartly installed Istio using Mesri for me, and then it continued to run the performance test. You can, what was the profile name that I used here? I'll take a quick look. So it was test SM. And according to that run, I can see the results of that here. So yeah, that's basically how you can create performance tests in CI using this action. Comments?
Yeah, so well, a couple of questions. One for Sakari. Sakari, do you know, like this way of embedding a performance test into your GitHub workflow as a GitHub action? Do you think this is valuable in your environment?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is in our to-do list. We haven't done it yet, but yeah, we need it.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, nice. Yeah. Good. Well, then let's explore this action a little bit more. So Rudraksh, the action that you've written is you're trying to make it really convenient for people to embed a performance test in their build in their CI, and that could be a continuous delivery pipeline. It could just be simple CI, so some of the use cases that are here are, okay, so different people are going to want to run different service meshes under different configurations. And so right now, the action, it allows the user to specify what service mesh they want to perform the test against.
Yep.
And what does that look like in terms of, I guess are we looking at it right there, like the configuration of the action to say, run this mesh?
Yeah, I'll quickly spin it up. So basically we are using
rather from the user's perspective. So if you're a user of the GitHub action, how do you just simply specify which service mesh you want to run?
You can just create a performance profile for that and specify the service mesh in that. Like I did in this one, I just specified it here. I specified Istio here. And then in my action, I use this one. I just use this profile name, and Meshri automatically deployed Istio for me to perform that test, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, but can you say something like, okay, this I believe deploys Istio what version, and can you specify that, okay, pull this our Istio from our repositories or Docker, what is this, registries, instead of from the upstream? Is that possible somehow?
Yep, you can specify that. You just need to, yeah, it's not a feature in this one yet, but yeah, you can specify the path to your binary, like for the service mesh that you want to test this on. You can give us the binary, give this Workload App binary, or specify the path to it. And the adapter for that service mesh, the Meshri adapter, will take care of deploying that version of the service mesh for you. We good?
Yeah, so there's a couple of, I think there's a couple of, I think the answer is like resoundingly yes to Sakari, but it is, there's a couple of ways, like there's a powerful construct in Meshri that we haven't talked about on this call, but it's referred to as a pattern. There's a whole book being written on service mesh patterns and how to use service mesh as well, or, and the book through O'Reilly, each of the patterns that are described in there are importable into Meshri so that you can import the YAML description of the thing, which would say, oh, a specific mesh at a specific version with certain configurations. You can import that into Meshri and it'll deploy that service mesh with that under that configuration with an app that you might want to specify. And you can also, in the same breath, in that same pattern, specify the type, a load test, a performance test. And so not only I think is what Rudraksh is saying is true, we were just talking a moment ago about Meshri and how it has emergent support for applications as like their own construct. So if you wanted to upload your own manifest, Kubernetes manifests, say this is the app that I want to do the tests against, that as part of a run like this, you could do, Rudraksh, I don't know that you're accounting for this just now, but this action, you were just showing behind the scenes, the action is invoking a few different Meshri CTL commands. So one of those commands can be to deploy an app that's been loaded into Meshery, deploy a service mesh, apply a configuration to that mesh.
Yep.
The tricky, or no, it's not tricky. That right now, so Sakari, just to qualify your use case, right now, each Meshery service mesh adapter, they, out of the box, they'll use they'll let you provision any number of different versions of the upstream service mesh. They'll also subsequently allow you to apply your custom configuration for what things that you want, the way that you want to configure the mesh. Is it your use case that you also have a different binary for, or is the custom bit that you're referring to, is it configuration or is it custom binaries of the mesh?
Custom binaries, and we deploy those via the STL-CTL operator overlays, where we specify that, okay, this this image, this STOD image, or this STL proxy image comes not from the upstream, but it comes from here, and point to that registry.
Nice. Yep. Yeah, I think then good. Rudraksh, that's a good one to take away and try out. I think that what you were just highlighting is hey, here's how you can do, be a good one to take away and maybe come back with in a couple of weeks on just explicit instructions on hey, here's how you would specify that.
Yeah. Hey guys, I need to jump to another call, but this was very useful. I'll try to spend now some more time on the SMP and Meshery and all of this one. And
nice.
So, yeah, good. Thanks, guys. This was good.
Thank you, Sakari. That's good.
Alrighty. Good. Thanks. Talk later.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Rudraksh, does that make sense?
Yep. Actually, we are doing the binary thing in SMI action right now, and it won't be much of a hassle to port it to this one too. So yeah, that's not a problem.
That's amazing. I didn't know that that's even possible. And so are you specifying that are you telling the service mesh adapter to use a different binary?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I get it now. Okay, that's cool. I didn't even know that. Yeah. We need to have we should go write some docs on that. That's pretty powerful. That's awesome. Actually, I didn't think about that. Yeah. Okay. Good. We're kind of running toward the end of time. We wanted to make sure we talked about, Abhi is here and Nitish is here. We wanted to brainstorm a bit on the way that performance charts are displayed to users in Meshery. And it's, I think, hard to understand. There's two things that can be done to improve it. And so, yeah, Rudraksh, if you have an example of a performance chart, there's something that can be done that takes very little imagination. It's very obvious, and it's the legend right up there. It says performance graph. Okay, good. One, I would submit to you that if we have to tell the user that they're looking at a performance graph, we're probably in a bad spot. Instead of performance graph, it can say the name of either the test ID, or the test result itself ID, or the name of the profile. So just cleaning up the data that's here is just really hard to read. It's just written. There's no information architecture that's applied. It's you have to read through it carefully and self-interpret the fact that there's the date On the second line, it's 2021, August 5th. It's like, okay, well, what can we maybe just call that out separately and accept? So it's just a cleanup of the presentation of the metadata. I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is table a good idea to do that? Like,
Yeah, quite possibly. I don't know by the way, like as we walk through this, I don't have a preconceived answer in my mind. Raj, if you go back to the other view, okay, so we're in this tabular view. The user has some high-level details about the particulars of that performance profile. It's queries per second, how long it was run, and then what some of the statistical averages were. Good, that's great. That's good high-level info. What mesh they ran it on with it. Okay, this is good. And this is a tabular format. So they're going from tabular to the chart. Yes, if you click on the graph again, the chart, it can make a whole lot of sense to me that, yeah, the title of the thing is probably, is that high level detail. It's either like the performance profile name and then the actual result ID, potentially above the chart or below is just, yeah, simply a tabular, again, like either a bulleted structure with some bolding or row-based, columns and rows of, the same details. It's really, yeah, just adding structure to it is a very simple thing to do, and it will improve legibility quite a bit. Full stop, like that should be a pull request. That should, that would be its own improvement. There's a secondary conversation about the chart itself, which it's not for the layman. And even for, I think, the seasoned engineer, it takes a little while to interpret. And I don't know that we're going to have better suggestions other than just aesthetics. We might be able to improve some aesthetics, but the way that the histogram is created and the calculations are done, I don't know that it can be any better than this. It's kind of scientific, and that's sort of what it has to be. The styling, though, of the tooltip that we were just seeing, it's not bad, but it can be improved to feel much more like the rest of Meshry itself. The same thing with the colors used here is like, oh, is orange bad? Or like, hey, there's a common color scheme. We can just improve some aesthetics here.
Okay.
And that's relatively simple, right? Like relatively, I know it can be a little tedious, but it's relatively.
Yeah.
One other, and like, use your imaginations too. Like, I'm not saying we want to go grab a whole new charting library and all that. Like, I don't think it's worth it for us to go do that rework. What's worth it for us to focus on is the use cases that Sakari and others are bringing. So one of those things that when we were sitting on a call with the other Intel engineer earlier this week, Rudraksh, if you go back to the main performance menu. So the engineer landed on the page. It's like, oh, okay. If you click on week or day, he's looking and he's like, oh yeah. So I'd run a couple. And so he clicks on an entry, an individual entry. And I think this.
Nothing happens.
Right, and nothing happens. Yeah, yeah. And so this is the next area to do something. It's like, hey, when someone clicks on that link or on an entry, what should happen? What is that?
Saying like it's not yet configured, or is it not working for some reason?
It was never created. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that the answer here is, well, that individual entry represents an individual performance test. When you're looking,
Yeah, you mean by performance test, you mean like the thing that we see in the performance profiles, right? Like each one of those charts is what you mean, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. The same tabular layout that you see of all the performance test results.
Yeah.
This is just a calendar layout of the same thing. So, and then on the tabular version, when you want to drill into the results itself, you click on the performance chart and it shows you the graph. So I guess the thought here is if someone clicks on an individual entry, fine, just show them the same modal that says, well, here's the results.
And secondly, there are a lot of empty spaces right in the right part of the website. So the calendar can be like widened up and it will be more clear to show things. And we can just put that configured service mesh metrics to the top of this table, the calendar table. Is that a good idea?
Yeah. Yes. Because it's hard to read the calendar.
Yeah.
One thing that we're not using in Meshry UI is a secondary, see where the title of the page is called performance? Well, just beneath that heading with the charcoal-ish, blue-grayish color, there could be a subsequent secondary, like, fairly thin, either a toolbar or reference for other things that you can do on this page. It's like an in-page navigator, like jump to the metrics, jump to the profiles, jump to the calendar type thing. Either there or maybe on the right-hand side or something. So the reason I'm saying this is because if we take that service metric, the configure service mesh metrics, and you put it on the very top, like most of the time, right now, most of the time, it will be blank for people because most of the time they don't have Prometheus and Grafana connected. So it's kind of like in that case, we're positioning a suboptimal default experience because by default, they won't have anything connected. So by default, they're going to see an empty widget. Okay, fine. Then let's put it at the very bottom. Okay, that would work. People may never configure it either. I don't know. Anyway, for now, like the ability, like one thing to be able to do as well is maybe let people grab the cards and drag them. That might be nice. But Abhi, to your suggestion, it probably is too much in the view. And so, yeah, having I guess it depends on the width of the screen. That might be what we want to do is make it responsive. If it's only this wide, only as wide as Rudraksh has it, then maybe, yeah, the calendar comes to the top because most of the time you're going to see that you have results and profiles. So. Is that okay? If we take the metrics, put them below.
Okay. And all these things, like all the UI is written in the Meshry repo, right? Or
Yep.
in the smooth performance one?
Yep. So these are, Meshry implements the service mesh performance spec. And so, yeah, all the things that we're looking at in the UI here are, in the Meshry UI, Meshry.
Okay. And secondly, like I would also want to work on some Golang issues, if you can suggest some.
Yeah, sure. There's a lot.
Yeah.
There are.
Yeah, one of the main reasons for me to like get in touch with the community is to learn like a service message and Golang especially.
Nice. Yeah, there's the ones that are probably closest at hand for you there's a bunch of things going on with GraphQL and resolvers that are written in Go. Those are adjacent to the UI, like things that you're showing in the UI are coming from either REST or GraphQL. And so, yeah, stepping in that way. So Barak and Dhruv, there's actually open PRs right now in Golang on the resolvers, actually specifically on performance. So yeah, It's not, I know these aren't necessarily starter issues, but don't let that stop you. I mean, because it's adjacent to the UI. It's a good place to jump in.
Okay, sure.
And those are good guys to be in contact with as well. I know you already know them. Okay. So to recap real quickly, I think it's just we talked about restyling the modal where we're showing the performance chart. And then we talked about adding a modal when someone clicks on a single entry that we would show them the performance chart there as well. And so between those things,
a thing to look into here is that when you run a test using mesh VCTL, the mesh field here doesn't get updated. So I'm not sure what exactly is the reason for that. Yeah.
So Abhi, Rudrox just pointed out exactly something that would need to be handled both on the UI and in Golang.
Sorry, what did you just say?
He was saying the results here, if you're sitting here on the UI, you're looking at one test result for this profile. Then you go over to Mesh3CTL and you run a few tests. You come back to the UI and it still just says 1. That's because there's not a GraphQL subscription for this data. And Barek is working toward that now.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was actually talking about a smaller thing that when you run a test using mesh VCTL, the mesh field here doesn't get reflected. Like this test used STO as a service mesh, but you don't see it here. But if you do this test using UI, you'll see the STO written here. Yeah.
Yeah.
A smaller thing, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah, we should raise an issue. And the issue is that on the CLI, you're specifying the adapter name, which is distinct from this label. This is just a label here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe. Not sure.
Well, so when you, in the UI here, when you select what service mesh you want to test against, it's just it's just an attribute, it's just metadata. It doesn't have any effect on the test itself. It's just a way of categorizing the test. Whereas when you specify the adapter on the command line, wait, are you specifying the adapter on the command line or are you specifying the label?
So with perf test, we don't actually need to specify an adapter, like the one which will, the profile that we'll grab and run will contain info about which service mesh to use.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Yep, makes sense. So, yeah, so I'm
yeah, this one, like this, I ran this one using UI, and you can see here it shows up the mesh name here, but then I ran this one using mesh VCTL, the same profile, but this does not show the mesh name. It's nitpicking, but yeah.
Yep, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, yep. Okay, so is anyone going to work on that one?
Yeah, I'll look into it. Like it's, I'll see what the issue is and we'll try to figure it out.
And it's quite possible that but yeah, I mean, it's quite possible that the problem is in Mesh3CTL itself.
Okay,
or,
first, like I'll examine like what the data, whether the data is actually coming from the network or not, and if it is so, then that should be a problem with the UI. Otherwise, like if otherwise, I believe it should be a problem with like Mesh3CTL itself.
And then for the other performance chart stuff, do we have any takers?
Yep, I'll create issues and I'll keep tracking them. Yeah, and like we'll see if anyone else is interested, or I'll also keep working on them as well.
Thank you. Good. Yeah, Abhi is here to do some of that as well.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Cool. Anything else today?
So hey, yeah, I had just one confusion about previous or way before previous meeting, like ohm workloads. So like where the question was the problem was to implement the ohm workloads inside filters section, right? We can edit filters with the help of those forms. So actually the filter is not being